The question is, this is the question I'm asking to all of you about this topic, affirmation. Do you remember in your career someone who believed in you when you did not believe in yourself that time? So if you remember those moments and you became a better person because of that belief, then that is the power of affirmation. Okay, so my friends, please use this power every day of your life. You have no idea how the power of belief can do to a person, to a child. If you have kids, don't judge them by their behavior, but look at them what they can become. I see kids as the future leader. Them as like, oh, you're naughty or what? No, I see you. No, I see you as a leader because we all failed in our generation. Whoever's our leader today is the result of our choices. But at least we can do something for the next generation. They can be better. And affirmation is so important so that we can encourage all people. Remember the pyramid, the hierarchy of needs. Only 25% reach the self-esteem. Not everyone, not the entire Philippine population has achieved high self-esteem. And let's start doing that. Let's change the world. Let's change other people by starting to believe in themselves.
The importance of empathy, the importance of compassion, the importance of kindness, because we cannot we cannot survive this crisis, Dina and Dino, without understanding the needs of our employees and navigating uncharted waters. We continue to have management committee meetings weekly, and we try to understand how the situation in the market, and we try to ensure that we respond to the needs of the market, and our employees are ready to respond to the needs of our customers. Learning agility, that's another skill that we need, because whatever we have learned or whatever we are learning now, we have to apply them after this pandemic. We have to ensure that all the challenges that we've faced and all the learnings that we have gained are going to apply in the future, because we will never know, even if this pandemic hasn't happened in our lifetime, it may happen again. So we have to be prepared. We have to be prepared now more than ever.
Nakakatuwang makita that, people are helping one another. They're being very compassionate. They're being very understanding of what others are going through. And for us leaders, I think it's always very important for us to balance doing compassionate leadership and also making sure we safeguard the needs of the business. But, at the same time, I think we're more mindful nowadays in terms of how do we make sure that people are first taken care of before we make some operational or business decisions. The fourth one is self-discipline. And this talks about how consistent are you in using your own style, in using your own personality when you deliver your work. And I think that's very, very important, because if you're not consistent, then probably you're not being true to yourself. So you need to have that discipline to be consistent. And to me, consistently is equal to, just be who you are, right? And be comfortable and be okay that that's you, and you don't need to change. You don't need to be somebody else. The fifth one is the character. When people are under certain challenges, or when people are under certain problematic circumstances, they get tempted, right? They get tempted to do something not good or probably not right. But we need to always remind ourselves that it's very important, especially nowadays, to keep our integrity as individuals, as leaders, as practitioners intact. And integrity is not just about doing what is right. It's also being very honest, being very open, and being very transparent. And that's part of how you communicate with others. And when you are honest, when you are truthful, people will feel the sincerity when you communicate. And when you are sincere, people will feel it, and people will likely be more supportive and understanding of the circumstances that you're trying to explain to them.
Did you know
Yeah.
in 1802,
Uh-huh.
all most of the contractors in the list were um, vulcanizing shops, hardware companies,
Mm-hmm.
security agencies. There were several in the list of band members doing gigs
Mm-hmm.
in different clubs
Yeah.
um, because it was only 100 pesos. But when they bumped it up to 100,000 and a paid up capital of 5 million, I think from 16,000 it went down to 8,000. Now it's 4,000, and I think it's a little more than 3,800 plus. And with this pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what the numbers are. Right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they went down.
Yeah. Uh, it's going to plateau. It's going
Yeah.
to go down very low. And plus the fact that a lot of people have lost their jobs already.
Yeah, I know. I have people in the neighborhood begging for food. Not
Yeah.
money, yeah, food.
I've heard that.
So,
This is not the first time that I've heard of that.
mhm.
And they would knock on your doors and they would ask for food. So,
Nakakaawa.
oh,
Yeah, it's very heartbreaking.
it's a reality. There was
Mhm.
a Grab delivery in my house last
Mhm.
month, and then the Grab delivery recognized me. Sir, kamusta na kayo?
Mhm.
And I got apprehensive. How do you know me?
Mhm.
And he told me, I'm a waiter in one
Mhm.
of the restaurants that where you frequent. Okay, I will
Mhm.
not mention the name of the restaurant.
Okay, okay.
And now I'm delivering food, delivering items because I have a motorcycle
Mhm.
and the restaurant closed down because it's in a mall.
Mhm.
So that's how he's making a living right now, delivering for.
Exactly, yeah.
So sabi ko, I told him, that's good.
At least they're
Because he's
surviving,
able
no?
to adapt, di ba? From a
Yeah, yeah,
waiter to a
yeah.
delivery person. And now, the good thing, he's earning more.
Yeah, they're
He's
probably
earning
the
more as
ones
a
that
delivery
are.
guy.
Yeah,
Di
I
ba?
agree. I agree. I agree.
You want to make enough money, but you want to make sure that the cash flow is moving. But now that COVID is in place, the COVID is here with us, and things are not as certain as they were. Challenging times calls for a different approach, and you need to put more weight on cash flow than profit. It should be a mindset where you do not risk doing business where there's a lot of profit possibilities, but you need to give credit to your customers, for example. But there is no assurance, there's less assurance nowadays that you'll be able to collect. So it's better to let go of some of those opportunities, but to protect whatever assets you have in hand. So these are the things we did to build up our capital. We held off all our capital expenditures. Why? These capital expenditures at the start of the year were approved based on the picture or the scenario where everything is normal. Things have changed. So you need to reevaluate if you need to spend those repairs and renovations for the new wing at in the office area. You need to check. But it should not be a closed deal thing. So sometimes you need to give exception, like we bought 2 more vehicles, right? And when we bought 2 vehicles, that's capital expenditure, but it was needed. All I'm saying here is you need to evaluate and reevaluate before doing any capital expenditures that were approved and decided on before the ECQ. Now, this is what was crucial also. Of course, in a purchasing or operations flow, you have suppliers, you have customers. So your suppliers, you work, those you are comfortable working with, you ask for longer terms or a rescheduling of the payments. At the other end, with your clients, you need to hold back credit sales transactions as much as you can. So in our case, even if the clients stopped buying or bought less from us, we had to let go of those opportunities just to be sure that our assets, our liquidity is protected. So that is what I mean when I say cash flow.
Yeah.
Very important.
People are the object of God's affection, and they should be treated as such. So if that's the case, diba? And we've been teaching equality, respect, diversity. That context alone, I mean, if people are the object of God's affection, you should treat them no less, right? Parang you should be more considerate. You should be more sensitive, and that really drove me to change the way I look at people. And use the lens of Jesus. And once you do that, it changes. It changes. And I say this with much boldness, because whether you're a religious leader or a corporate or a secular leader, your lens has to be different, because you can be preaching at the pulpit and then you treat people badly, or you're biased against people, because Jesus wasn't. He was very compassionate. He was very understanding, but he's very truthful as well, because he also said in the Bible, speak the truth in love. So that's one thing. It's perspective. It's people orientation. It's putting people first. Of course, following your my devotion to God. And then the second thing is to lessen the focus on myself. I mean, we as generally, I mean, nobody would admit it. You wouldn't admit it. Normally, we don't admit that we're selfish individuals, but we are. Nobody's born selfless in this world, right? Have you ever seen a baby after being born from the hospital? The first thing that they did was sweep the floor and wash the dishes. Diba in that we cry, we woe, and then we demand for things for ourselves. And we only become mature adults when we realize that life is more about what we give rather than what we get. And unfortunately, a lot of adult or older individuals are still very childish in the way they treat other people and the way they demand for things. So it takes a lot of recalibration. It takes a lot of reflection and recalibration, rather, to actually change the way you behave from a very selfish individual to a selfless individual. And like what I said, I'm a work in progress in that area. But being aware is always the beginning. Am I being self-centered in the way I'm conducting this interview, or the way I'm answering this interview? Am I being self-centered in leading my team? Am I being self-centered in demanding this from my wife? Then and as soon as you have that self-check, you start changing it. You start changing your direction, your decision. And it takes a lot of control, I guess. And that takes a lot of practice over time. Nobody masters self-control overnight. It takes a while. And even for a person who claims to be the representative of Lead Like Jesus, it takes a while for me as well.
Change has speeded up incredibly because of the pandemic. People are saying there's been 10 years of change within the last couple of months, which could well be true. But to be able to cope with it, we have to understand first what is change. And the first thing to understand about it is it's exponential. So if you look on the left-hand side of this chart, you see firstly life on Earth, 4 billion years, but humanity only appeared at the very end of that. And then within the whole history of humanity, the technology era was only right at the end of that. And it suddenly speeded up. We spent thousands of years, sort of at the very basic level, but we only entered the computer age in the last 50 years. And even within that 50 years, there's exponential change on exponential change on exponential change. So it's going crazy. It's almost a vertical line at the moment. With the result, as my friend Roland in America said, was we will see more change in our lifetimes than all of the change for the entire history of the world that has led up to it. So interesting, and some would say a little bit scary times we live in. But first, this is to understand the context of that. And even you'd look at this and say, well, maybe I could handle that. But life is never that simple. So the problem, if you took like a microscope to that exponential line, you'll see it's made of loads of these called S-curves. And an S-curve is where an entire chain of change starts and stops. So a good way to demonstrate this is, let's say, the entire technology move on recorded music. So before there was recorded music, if you wanted to listen to some music, you'd have to sing yourself, or a friend would have to play a guitar or piano or something. But then in the late 1800s, the first wax disc was made, and then they improved the technology and it became a record player. Then there was a Sony Walkman, and then there were discs. So there was, that technology went as far as it could. But now you don't need any of that because the internet came along and replaced the entire thing with downloadable music. So you now listen to your music on your smartphone. So there was an entire chain of technology, and then it was transitioned out to be something completely unrecognizable. And it's those jumps that throw people for good reason. So here, let's look at an incremental change, something going along one of those little S curves. So you can imagine, you know, your mum and pop shop, and everybody can understand how that could change to the shop on the right. Of course, it's going to be bigger, better, tidier, shinier. But what happens if that sales moved entirely online and you were doing online shopping? That's a transformational jump. And someone who was expecting a shopping center and a space center, you know, it's not on the same line. It's completely moved. And that transformation jump is what's happening more and more, not just in one thing, but loads of things at the same time in a very complex scenario. This is what people have trouble getting their heads around.
So what do you see here? You see a rabbit or you see a duck. So it depends on what perspective you are looking at this picture from. You will see two different images. What perspective do you want to train yourself to look at? Is it the rabbit or is it the duck? And that ultimately is what we need to change our mindset towards. It's basically moving to a perspective. What do we want to wipe out? And what do we want to focus on? So if we are focusing on the good, that is a start to where our mindset can essentially change. So that's about having the right or positive perspective, depending on your mindset. And a new mindset, a clear mindset, can definitely have new results. But it's easier said than done, right? Everybody essentially says, have a positive view, think positive always. But it's not necessarily that easy, because essentially, like any form of relationship, there is also a psychology of what leaders go during downturns.
Therefore, even people in their late 20s can also find something of value here. Okay, so let's see, there will be two parts. Part one, we'll talk about what your CV says about you. And part two, we jump off from part one, use it as an anchor, and then I'm going to talk about frequently asked questions about managing your career. Okay, so let's start part one. What does your CV say about you? Okay. One very important thing that recruitment managers, hiring managers look for is job stability, because it is an indication of performance. It could also be an indication of emotional stability, resilience, the ability to work through conflicts or challenges. Companies, recruiters do not like, or hiring managers will naturally avoid people who seem to be experiencing chronic discontent. Okay, number two, second is thinking and communication skills. If you were to ask many HR leaders, what are the musts when they evaluate the potential for executive talent, many of them will say intelligence. Now, executive intelligence is a complex mix of different kinds of thinking abilities: strategic thinking, analytical thinking, critical thinking, creative thinking. But common to all this and a prerequisite is clarity of thought. And clarity of thought is the ability to sift through all the information and to crystallize, to distill and crystallize the most important ideas. Okay? So how does that become evident or apparent? How is thinking and communication skills evident or apparent in one CV? It is your ability to use precise language and in as few words as possible, and to differentiate yourself from your peers and from other professionals.
Honoring commitments and encouraging this behavior in others. It involves appropriately expressing specific feelings at work, such as happiness and frustration, providing feedback to colleagues about the way you feel, and expressing emotions at the right time, right degree, and to the right people. Leaders who are high in this are often described as genuine, whereas leaders who are low in the scale are often described as untrustworthy. And it is important in leadership because it helps leaders create understanding. It helps leaders develop openness and feelings of trust in others. Leaders who are guarded, who avoid conflict and are inappropriately blunt about the way they feel can create mistrust, artificial harmony and misunderstandings with those around them. And leaders need their people to be open with them as well. It works both ways. If as a leader you do not role model this behavior with your direct reports, they will also be very guarded with you.
How can you become a leader and a servant at the same time? But leaders with a serving attitude can make workplace more meaningful. And spirituality in organization is no longer a hypothetical concept. It is a reality. More so now, I think all of us would feel that spirituality in the workplace, and this is not only being prayerful, but rather being mindful of yourself, mindful of your wholeness and your well-being. It is a reality now. And I'd like to go back to Robert Greenleaf, who was the very first staunch advocate of servant leadership. And it is a lifestyle. He says it is a lifestyle that's embedded in and led by the natural feeling within you, within a leader, that we don't only want to serve, but to serve first. You know, many scholars actually consider Jesus Christ's life and teachings as constituting the ultimate example of servant leadership. On the opposite of some leadership theories that are defined and assessed only by what leaders do, servant leadership calls for a consistency between your character as a leader with your actions, your values, and their complete commitment to serve others.
So let's talk about teams for a moment. This is the American Soccer Association's women's national team. Now, what would we think their commitments are? Right, to win the game, right? Now, you and I have both seen teams where the commitment to win the game was not paramount. You know, people have their own agendas. They want to look good. They want to make someone else look bad. You know, we call that sort of politics in organizations, right? It's usually easy to get a common commitment to win a game, as long as the commitment is just for a few hours. You know, when you're on a project, other commitments come into play. So we've set up projects where individual commitments to take maternity leave, go on vacation, work less than 10 hours a day, leave early on certain days to go to class, were taken on by the team. So everybody's commitments get included in the commitments of the team. So we're talking about how teams are constrained. And the question is, are they constrained by the sum of the constraints, the sum of the blind spots, or the intersection of the constraints? It can go either way. A poorly run group will produce nothing new. However, a well-facilitated group can produce miraculous results. And obviously, in these cases, diversity can be a great advantage. You have people from different backgrounds, with different points of view and so on. They can see things that other people can't see. So if you think that the sum of the constraints doesn't apply, you've never worked in a large bureaucratic organization where anyone can say no and only everyone together can say yes. I mean, that the US Senate is a prime example. So it's one last thought on teams. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.